Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Atheist Uprising. I'm your host, Joshua Void, and tonight we're going to delve into an awesome topic. And this topic is going to be the problem with religion, the problem with theism, the problem with theology. But what we're going to do is we're going to tackle it in a sociological aspect tonight. What I'm going to try to do is break this up into a multi-series in a sense. So I'm going to hit up all the aspects of where theology and theism and religion in and of itself run into issues, run into problems with our everyday lives and everything like that, and how we can make a better situation from the issues which come from theism, and how we can then change the topic matter into skepticism and everything like that, and how that can really be of benefit to human beings and our society and everything like that, including the bringing forth of well-being and so on and so forth. However, before I do that, I do want to thank our Patreon supporters. I want to thank Linear, I want to thank TART, and I want to thank Dion LaShay for really helping us out and really helping us do what we love to do, which is create awesome content and videos for you, the viewers. The other thing that I want to thank are you who are within the comments section right now. We couldn't be where we are right now without you. So thank you so much for actually helping us get to where we are today and to where our future goals will bring us. But without any delay, let's jump in to the topic of tonight. Problem with religion, episode 1, sociological issues. So, when we really look at, yeah, that's right, here we go. But anyways, when we look at religion in and of itself, and we look at its sociological implications on society, what do we first see? The first thing that I see within at least a lot of religions, in a sense, is the way that we treat each other and the people who are on the outside, right? The us versus them mentality. Now, don't get me wrong. I also sometimes hold that as well. The kind of, we need to build our own group. I'm sorry. But we ourselves need to create our own group, and a strong group at that, in order to help out other people who are on the fence and everything like that, in order to create, in my opinion at least, a better tomorrow. And I think that humanism and stuff like that will be the thing that drives that better tomorrow. However, I think when we look at theism, it's a different story, because it's not based on here on earth, right? It is based on the ramifications of what we do here as a test. How are you doing, Dion LaShay? And welcome to, it's like, I thank you. Thank you for coming on by. Thank you. It's amazing. Thank you, Linear, for coming on by. It's amazing. I do want to thank everybody who's in the comment section right now. The problem with this, right, is that when we are preparing ourselves for a afterlife, right, we don't necessarily care, or we don't care about this life. So for us, if we are theists, we are thinking, what is the best way in order for us to get to heaven, right? For us to get to God, to us to get to this place, this utopic idea that, when we really look at it, starts bringing forth questions and everything based on, how could we actually rely on this? How could we rely on following these dogmatic scriptures, let's just say to a T, like the literalists do? And then from there, will that actually bring us to the place, the promised land where we want to be? Now, that is not what this is about, but it kind of ties in with the way that people interact with each other when they're theists, right? when we look at the sociological implications, we see with theists, they look at the other, and the other is a multiplicity of different things, right? The other can be individuals who are gay. The other could be those who are lesbian, those who are transsexuals, those who are not theists, those who are uh, other religions, and the list continues on and on and on to what the other is when we're talking about theism in general, right? And that implication in and of itself kind of draws the veil, I see, to the theist. Now, there are some people who might come to me and say, well, Josh, the problem is that you're looking at the conservatives. You're not looking at the liberal theists. The liberal theists are more accepting of these individuals and everything like that. But the problem is, at least the way that I look at it, is that even the liberal theist is still working themselves and working their way into trying to find a way to, quote unquote, heaven, this utopic vision, right? And from there, they're already formulating their worldview based on that end goal. So the question to me is that, are they actually, and no, I don't want to do that fallacy, so I won't actually state that. However, I do think that there are problems even with liberal theism, right? Because they take apart the book, in a sense, the holy book, the religious book, and say, well, I don't agree with this, I don't agree with this, I don't agree with this, but I still believe in the God that has revealed this to the people who wrote the Gospels. Now, that to me is very interesting. That to me, I find is like, you're running into a problem now. You're in a conundrum as a liberal theist, because these people who had been inspired by quote unquote God to, or through revelation, in order to write these words on paper, or on papyrus, I should say, and those being brought into a book that is now looked at as the Bible, we now understand that where are we going with this, right? How are we going to look at these individuals and say, well, okay, yeah, you can believe what you want to believe, but the thing that you believe is actually a detriment to society. If people look at it literally, which certain conservatives do, now we start running into a problem, because now you're only helping the conservative by perpetuating the belief that they have, because you believe in that too. You're just taking away all the bad things and hoping that that can make the book more purified for you. But in the long run, I find it kind of delusional, because it's just like, then why do you believe in a book that you need to take out so many things from in order for you to think that this God is worth worshiping? Or why would you believe in something that you think, well, okay, well, that is of that time, right? Because right now you're already logically thinking in your head that these things aren't meant to be brought into this day. And my question is, where is the allegory, right, that brings us to a better place, brings us to a better world for us to live together without necessarily, like, obviously, this is now a little more utopic than usual, but it's true. Where can we look at the Bible and say, oh, I found the key in order for us to live together without any type of hindrance on the other? Right? Because even though for me too, I am that individual who also looks at, well, look, I'm an atheist and I know that a non-God world, when we're looking at a God world, cannot necessarily cohabitate with each other. It's not something that is, how can I say it? I find that people delude themselves by saying, well, we can both live together underneath the same sky, and at the same time stating, well, I don't necessarily agree with what the theist is stating. And I'm like, well, right there, you're causing problems. groups, right? And those are the sociological implications that I'm going to be talking about, based on the certain hatred that theists have towards a particular group, whatever that particular group may be they transgender, be they gay, be they lesbian, be they the plethora of other minority groups which are out there and everything like that. And I find that the only way in order to remedy that is through through humanism, through skepticism, through atheism. That's the way that we can draw back from dogma and look at the actual ways in order for us to see the other person for who they are, and not state, well, this is the choice that they're making. Because just like how a good friend of mine states, we don't choose our brain, right? And through not choosing our brain, we cannot point at other individuals and say, well, they chose. How could you choose if your brain has those thought processes already amalgamating within it by the time, or through obviously our experiences, but through our experiences over time, which then brings us to like a particular a person of the same sex, or the person who wants to change their identity, not identity, but change their gender, or whatever the situation may be. The implications and ramifications of that can lead to severe harm to individuals, and theists, definitely Christians, and definitely Muslims, and definitely individuals of the Jewish faith run into this problem, right? Because within their books, they are anti that. And those are sociological implications that cannot be worked around. People can say a lot of things like, no, that's not what the Bible meant, or whatever the situation is. What we have at the moment is what people follow. And if those individuals follow this particular scripture and these particular scriptures as a whole, we can slowly but surely start to see that these ramifications are problematic for not only those minority groups, but even individuals who accept those groups within their ranks, right? Because now you are the threat to that theist, because you are allowing that sin to be perpetuated within society. And now we run into that problem. Now we run into, well, what are the ramifications to society from people who are within the minority groups, or the fringe groups, let's just say, being harmed by this type of rhetoric, right? And that in and of itself causes such devastation to not only those individuals, but that even spreads to the individuals' families as well, right? Because if we see that those individuals wish to, I don't know, harm themselves over the abuse that that's being heaped upon them by the theists and everything like that, well, what do you think the ramification is to that person's parents, right? That person's parents are now needing to deal with all those thought processes, all those, seeing their child in harm's way, either through bullying or whatever the situation may be. And there are a lot of people today that cannot handle that. And a lot of negative aspects can be brought from that, right? So in the end, what we really need to look at when we talk about the problems with religion, the problems with theism, the problems with theology, are those exact issues. How can we look at these individuals and state, well, they're just living their lives. Let them live their lives the way that they wish to. I'm not talking about lesbians or gay individuals or transsexuals here. I'm just talking about the theist, right? Because they're going on these attacks on on this minority group, and yet we're kind of like, well, let them have, let the theists be the theists that they are, right? And that is the problem, because that's the thing, right? When we have two worldviews, those worldviews predominantly come crashing in amongst each other, right? And mostly for us to quote unquote change our minds is that worldview needs to be horrendously battered in a sense, or sometimes completely destroyed in order to be recreated into something that is of benefit, right? And when we're looking at well-being as being that ultimate benefit, then we can start to understand that those who are against the well-being of your normal average citizen, right, that hasn't done any crimes or anything like that, or heinous or horrendous crimes, I mean to say, then obviously the benefit goes towards that person who wishes to build that case of well-being to those other minority groups, and to say, hey, come, our group is welcoming, come here, everything is perfectly fine over here. But if you're looking at another group that is hindering these individuals, right, hindering the gay community, hindering the lesbian community, hindering the transgender community and everything like that, we end up seeing society not really caring for the well-being of your average law-abiding citizen. And from there, you cause ramifications and implications that can actually create a social system which is full of stresses, in a sense, upon itself, through these minority groups being crushed, in a sense, by the theists that believe in their dogmatic literature. And hence the sociological ramification, at least for these communities. Now, the other ramification that I want to actually talk about is predominantly within the community, when we look at parents to their children, right? Because a lot of parents, since we are biologically looking, or our minds have a tendency to biologically look at our children as obviously our offspring to which we wish to protect, right? But the problem is that sometimes through theism, this is hindered, in a sense, and sometimes through other cases it is hindered as well, such as somebody that might have some of the psychological issues and stuff like that might be hindered from protecting their own children, right? But when we look at theism is predominantly a thing that looks upon their children as like, you do not sin, and if you do sin and you perpetually sin, I will push you away from me, right? Or push you away from the family in order to keep our sinful life away from our sinless life, and push you because you are living a sinful life, right? Now, what this is shown when it comes to individuals growing up, children growing up, and they're being abused in such a way, or even worse, by their own parents, through their parents' own theological indoctrinations, through your parents' own religious indoctrinations, what happens? It causes the next generation to be hindered, right? Because human beings are sociological beings. We love to be together. We love to come together and discuss things and hang out and just be part of a group, right? But if that group, and definitely the first group that you're ever going to meet, is your family group, and if your family group already is pushing you away because of the ideas that you have, now you start to see the ramifications of this within society, within the sociological framework of our society in and of itself. And we start seeing that our children suffer greatly through theism in certain cases. When a parent starts to push away their child and the child is being neglected because of their disbelief in a deity, or because of their quote unquote sinful ways, because now, or not now, but because that child is gay or a lesbian or a transsexual, let's just say, now all of a sudden the parent looks at the child, sadly, in certain cases, as an abomination. And through looking at that child as an abomination, what ends up happening is the sociological framework and that child growing up is going to be hindered from actually achieving certain things. Now, don't get me wrong. Children sometimes find a way to overcome certain problems and continue to climb up the actual sociological ladder and the cultural ladder in and of itself, and let alone the job market and so on and so forth, without necessarily their parents being there to help them or to guide them. That is true. But most cases, when we really look at it, children do need their parents, do need that fundamental base. And if they don't have that, sadly, they sometimes are doomed to fail. They're sometimes doomed to become something that might even become a hindrance to society, sadly to say, right? Because they didn't have that parental guidance to help them get through those cases. And because of that, we start to see the inevitable downfall of our sociological exist, or not sociological existence, that doesn't make any damn sense, but our structure within society starts to crumble because the foundation isn't strong as of today, and let alone as of before as well, because of the thought process of my kid is doing such abominations that I will not associate with them. And from there, they are left to, quote unquote, left in the wilds, or left to fend for themselves. And that in and of itself causes such strain on our system, because then they have to guide themselves through the world. And we don't know what that could come, or what can come, or what ramifications could come through that, right? Because you don't know the people who you're going to meet are going to be the best people in order to raise you up. And they might be the very people that might pull those the naive individuals into the abyss with them. And if that is the case, you would start to slowly see that they will be wrapped up in such, now, I don't want to say heinous acts, like obviously that's not the case, but self-harming acts, right? And I'm not talking about drugs in general, like weed and stuff like that. I don't mind. I'm not somebody who's anti-weed or anything like that, or even DMT and stuff along those lines. But if we really look at what some of these individuals, such as gangs and stuff like that, and what they bring to the table to these young youth, for instance, or to these youth, I should say, the drug abuses that happen within there, and let alone the abuses within that group in and of itself, which can be extremely harming, would completely and absolutely create an environment for that youth to be contra the society that they live in, right? And if that is the case, as I said, the framework starts to fall. The framework starts to fall apart. And all this because the parent in and of themselves certain parents look at their children as abominations and throw them aside, in a sense, in order for them not to live around that sinful behavior, right? And you see the ramifications and the downfall of that particular youth because of this particular thought process, right? So that is more along the lines of a parent to their child, right? A parent to their offspring, and how that in and of itself can cause the ripple effects that doesn't just affect that child, right? But it also affects their children and their children's children, and perpetuates the cycle of what is called or perpetuates the vicious cycle, right? And a lot of times, which is sad, is that a lot of these youth, which are forgotten by their parents, head towards either that gang life or sadly become highly addicted to drugs and all the rest of that because they're just not really guided along a path which would be beneficial to them, right? And that's what I find that religion sometimes can bring upon children is this negative aspect of you live in a life filled with sin and I do not want to associate with you. Instead of being like, I see that you need help, let me help you. You know, now don't get me wrong. There are parents that are out there that really wish to help and guide their children, and their children are doing their own thing, obviously, and that can also be a ramification to the development of the child as well, because the parent is like, I'm here to help, and they kind of just continue doing not neglectful stuff, but either self-harming things or whatever the situation may be. And from there, it can literally, again, cause massive ramifications and a rippling effect throughout not just that youth's life, but onto their kids and their kids' kids and so on and so forth, if the cycle is not broken, right? But I find that a lot of individuals, and even within the atheist community, or secular, I should say, community, I hear so many stories about individuals that have been thrown to the wayside by by their religious family, and I when I hear these stories, it kills me on the inside because I couldn't even imagine doing that to my own child, to my own kids and everything like that. And now all of a sudden, these individuals are being just thrown aside and just and somehow coming out at the end of it, not, I wouldn't say better than ever, but coming out at the end of it, finding their own way to adapt to the situation. And to me, I find that is one of the best things that can possibly happen, is for individuals to find their own way of doing things, right? And that's the thing that I do want to also talk about too, based on these sociological ramifications, is that we need to also, as an atheist community, or as a secular humanist community, try our best to be there for these youth that are being thrown aside by religious individuals, and even thrown aside by people who aren't necessarily religious but just don't care about their kids or whatever their psychological issue may be, right? We need to be there in order to help these kids get on the right track, because the future isn't necessarily created by us. It's created by the next generation. And if we're not there for the next generation, society slowly but surely will start to come undone because of it. So I think as a secular humanist, I truly do believe that we do need, as secular humanists, to create institutions that are out there for these particular children and to help these particular individuals get on their feet, and to help propel them and get them ready for their future, in a sense. But obviously, at this moment, we're talking about something way far into the future. I'm not even near that point yet into trying to are having the money in order to create these institutions in and of themselves. But that's something that I'm truly driving for as well, is to create something that the next generation can have that can be beneficial for them and for their future, not just for their future, but for their next of generation as well. But that's beyond the point. Let's jump back onto the point, which is problems with religion. So that's another ramification, is to toss one's child aside and say, you need to fend for yourself and everything like that. And that can be because it's not only just because their child is an atheist or agnostic, but it's also because that child may have political leanings sometimes, or that child may have, I don't know, might like the same sex, or that individual doesn't feel like themselves within their own body and henceforth wants to change that in order for them to feel much better with their existence. But yet their own parents look at that and just fall apart at the seams, and that's where we run into, as I state a lot of times within this video, huge problems and everything like that. But in the end of the day, even though that there are these sociological issues, right? And I forgot one. I forgot one other sociological issue, and that is poverty, right? Where do we see so much of these religious doctrines being espoused is sadly within the communities that are most impoverished, right? They are the ones that hold on to that and this is the point where even for me it's difficult, right, to even state, because when we're looking at a community that is impoverished, that is the only thing that they have that can give them that hope that maybe there's something better, even if within this life I'm unable to achieve any of my goals. I know that if I live a biblical life, that my my afterlife might be better than the life that I have now, right? And obviously, as a secular humanist, even though that for me I'm more of a person that's based on let's just charge and attack the issue, when it comes to individuals that are impoverished and individuals that only have theism to help them through their day to day, I kind of stop and think to myself, shit, is like, what do I have to offer, right? Because the one thing is that I can go in and start smashing apart the edifice that they use, that religious edifice that they use in order to help them hope for something better. But if I don't have anything to offer them, what is the point of that? What I'm doing now is the cruelty upon them, right? I'm smashing the very thing that gives them hope, and then I leave them to their own devices, or I don't have something that can offer either the same amount of hope to them, right? So the question then lies, what can we do? Because that's the thing, right? Within impoverished communities, this is where we see religion actually explode. And through that, we see even religious abuses happening within these, sadly to say, impoverished communities as well. And when we really look at this, we see the ramifications on what society is now built on is a facade, a religious facade that is meant to have people perpetually hope for something better, but that better isn't within this life. That better is within the next life. But obviously, as secular humanists, we don't have that. We don't have that luxury of thinking, well, the next life is going to be the best life. There is no next life. There's only this life now. So when we look at that and we see that certain individuals falling into deep despair because of their economic situation and their sociological situation, and realizing that there's nothing there for them, right, instead of this, but yet there's also the negative aspect of religion that comes through, which hinders them from being proper, let's just say, well, I wouldn't say proper parents, but hinders them from being a proper foundation for their children, right? And what happens is that the perpetual wheel of poverty continues, because what does theism, or at least Christianity, state is that don't worry about the material world, only think about the spiritual world. But the problem is that how could you think about the spiritual world when you need to eat? When you need money in order to actually get things that are beneficial for you and your family, to live at least some sort of stable, or at least live a life, right? you need to have some kind of money to generate, right? But the thing that's sad is that they're working paycheck to paycheck, and there's no way for them to actually get out of that circular or that vicious circle. And from there, what ends up happening is that the family, let alone the kids, and let alone the kids, they're stuck within that, and there's no way for them to actually get out unless there are certain other well, I don't want to say you have a prodigy or anything like that, but you have somebody who is of a great, or who is able to go into school and stuff like that, and whose parents kind of like focus all their resources onto that with whatever help that they can get, and finally maybe that child can break through that cycle and everything like that. But predominantly, sadly, that cycle perpetuates. And the reason why is because of the religious doctrine doesn't tell people to, okay, like this life matters just like the next life. Try to get to your position, or try to get to a position within life in order to, and I know it's difficult. I'm not trying to espouse some sort of fairy tale here. I know it's extremely difficult for individuals to climb up that social ladder, right? Or that economic ladder in and of itself. But the thing is that when we really look at it, right, the only few individuals can get through by creating riches for themselves via whatever way they do. But predominantly, the major way of getting past that is through education. It's through the educational system in and of itself, which then could help them get better jobs that they can then redistribute that money, hopefully helping themselves, but at the same exact time helping their parents and so on and so forth, if they can, right? But in the long run, the situation is, I find that it's the religious doctrine that forces individuals to live that life of perpetual poverty through faith, which is false hope in something that might never come to be. And yet, that's all they have. And that's why, for me, another thing is that I want to try to create something that is based on creating an environment that has, that when people, at least people can strive for that goal, right? Instead of just being like, you can't strive for any goal because of the economic situation and the sociological situation that you're in, right? And that brings me to the last point of tonight's video, and that is those of minority groups such as African Americans and such as Latin Americans and so on and so forth, and Native Americans and Asian Americans and stuff. And the circumstance here is that those that are within that minority group, predominantly within Latin America, the Latin Americans and the African Americans, have the hardest time, right, trying to get to where they want to be, because they only have three institutions at this very moment that can help them: sport, church, and the military, or gangs. Four. My apologies. Four. And that in and of itself is such a heart-wrenching thought process that's all this, like, those are the majority of things that is left on the table for African Americans, Native Americans, and let alone for Latin Americans, are only those four institutions, right? And let alone, yeah, school, but how it's so difficult to get through school, let alone even if you have money, right? If you got ADD, if you got all the rest of this other stuff that is hindering you from going to school, and now you have the African American community, Latin American community, Native community being hindered by first religion, because again, the thought process is the same. Don't think about this world, think about the next, right? And the final goal is the next world. But the reality is that we need to think about this one, right? And this world and our circumstances that we're living in now, and how to better those circumstances for the future, right? And those future goals and those future endeavors to drive. But the thing is that religion doesn't have that aspect. Religion has the other aspect of, okay, suffer, but know that through your good biblical works, you're going to get heaven. And that in and of itself is something that's the most heart-wrenching thought process that I can possibly imagine for those minority communities, is that thought process of there's really not that much for them to look forward to instead of that next life. And that next life is a placebo for this life, right? And in the end of the day, religion doesn't give you that safety blanket, which is there. It kind of just tells you to close your eyes, live through the misery that you're living through. Hopefully you're able to follow the biblical texts and not sin, and henceforth you can live that better life or whatever in heaven or whatever. But in the long run, and when we really look at through science and through how atoms work and everything like that, what we end up seeing is that atoms do not have these special qualities of lifting spirit, right, to heaven or anything like that. There is no prospect such as that. And henceforth, we only have this life. And the lie that I see that religion perpetuates hinders all that is within that group, that socioeconomic group. And from that very point, I feel that we as secular humanists need to create something that can actually help individuals have that same hope, not the hope of something like transcendent, such as like a heaven or something like that. No, but a hope at least that people can feel here on earth, that they can succeed and they don't need to feel that the church is the only way in life that they need to go through the misery that they're living through, So in the end, that is my little talk on the problems of religion. And that is the first episode of many episodes to come. I hope that you enjoyed the video. I hope that it was somewhat educational in the sense and not just the ramblings of a individual. And in the end, I really do want to thank everybody here at this moment that are really helping us out reach for that goal, of creating that world which individuals would enjoy to be in and everything like that. So again, thank you all so much for watching the video. You're the reason why I'm here. You're the reason why I'm doing this. You guys help me just by being here into wanting to create more videos and to wanting to delve into much more topic matters and stuff like that. Again, I need to thank Linear and Dion LaShay for being here, and thank you so much for being a Patreon. Again, I really do appreciate it. Thank you very much. Tomorrow's episode, what we're going to do is we're going to be talking about how to tackle theists, right? So when you're in a debate, when you're in a conversation with theists, how do we tackle these particular individuals? What are the best way? What I think is the 3 best ways of tackling theists in general. So it's going to be really interesting conversation. If you want to join it, if you want to join in, let me know. I would love to have you on the show. If not, come on through and hear the conversation that happens. Again, thank you everybody for being part of this, and I will see you tomorrow at the same time. Have a great night, have a great weekend, and have a great rest of week. See you later, and remember to keep the uprising alive. Booyah! Where is it? Oh no! Have a 1 second. Where's the banner? No.